Hey, happy Tuesday. This is Ryan Duffy, your host. Question: what is it like running an $11 billion space business at a publicly traded company and managing a team of nearly 22,000? Another question: what about building the human-rated Orion spacecraft that just finished a 25-day trip around the moon? Today, we will get the answers to those questions and a whole lot more with Lockheed Martin's Robert Lightfoot. I'll give you the skinny on his resume and Lockheed Martin Space, and then we will bring Robert on the show. But first, I want to share a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Altec Incorporated. Altec is a leading custom injection molding and precision machining manufacturer of key parts and components for rockets and satellites. And yes, that includes small sats. Altec works with customers to develop solutions tailored to their mission needs and goals. Based in the United States, Altec's dedicated team provides design assistance and manufacturing for proprietary and confidential projects. As if Altec's custom injection molding, in-mold electronics, heat treating, painting, and testing wasn't already the whole 9 yards, Altec also provides assembly and kitting for a wide range of structural and mechanical products. Learn more at altec-inc.com. That's ALTEK-inc.com. Okay, picking up where we left off. Robert Lightfoot is the Executive VP of Lockheed Martin Space and an officer of Lockheed Martin Corporation. Robert leads the LM Space business, which is one of the 4 major divisions of his parent company. That business builds technology systems for defense, civilian, and commercial space customers, and its portfolio ranges from integrated systems for satellites, to space-based missile defense, to space observatories, to interplanetary robotic spacecraft. That's a mouthful. Gotta get used to saying it though. Robert became EVP of Space on January 1st of this year, so he is coming up on his 1-year anniversary. Prior to the current post, Robert was VP of Operations for LM Space, the same unit. Before that, Robert spent 29 years at NASA, rising up the ranks to become Associate Administrator, which is the highest ranking civil service position at the agency. He held a variety of leadership roles at NASA, including Director of the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, and Director of Propulsion Test at Stennis in Mississippi. He holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Alabama, and I don't know if I'm ashamed or proud to say it, but we didn't talk once about college football in this conversation. It was a great discussion nonetheless, and it's probably good that we didn't touch on it so that I don't alienate any of our listeners. Without further ado, Lockheed Martin's Robert Lightfoot. Robert, welcome to Pathfinder.
Great to be here, Ryan.
So where are you calling in from this morning?
This morning I'm in Denver, Colorado at our headquarters for Lockheed Martin Space.
Love it. And what's this visual? Is there a story behind the visual of space that you have behind you?
It's just an old Hubble shot. We're gonna have to update it and put a James Webb shot in there, I think.
There you go. I didn't know if it was the new telescope yet or not, but yeah, maybe that can.
We actually built Hubble years ago for NASA.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of Hubble stuff.
That could be a very. I mean, it's a bit late now, and we're getting into like last minute Christmas shopping, but it could be a very cool gift to maybe next year. The JWST shots, like posters, to send to staff or their families. So it'd be hard to do your full bio justice, and in the intro that I record after this, I'm going to attempt that. But I would love to hear how you sort of got your start in space, and we can actually maybe just start with education, and then your time at NASA, and all the way up to, of course, we'll get into Lockheed Martin Space.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky, Ryan. I had a father that was a professor of math and at a very, very small liberal arts school. And he was always doing science stuff. I grew up in Alabama, and he had a public television show that he did. It was basically, if you think about Mr. Wizard or Mr. Science, kind of from the old days, he did that for Alabama Public Television. I ended up being his guinea pig a lot as a kid. He'd bring me in there and fool me with science questions and things like that. So that kind of got me interested in math and science. And basically when I was looking at colleges, the town I grew up in had no real engineering. There's just wasn't anybody doing engineering in that town. And my guidance counselor said, "Hey, you should be an engineer." And I mean this as serious as I can be. I thought, I'm going to drive trains. That's what I'm going to do. I actually thought that's what an engineer did. So ended up going to the University of Alabama into mechanical engineering there, and graduated. And about halfway through, I got a job with a company called Rockwell International as a summer hire up in Huntsville, Alabama, supporting Marshall Space Flight Center. And man, if the bit wasn't set then, it got set at that point.
Yeah. Well, when your dad brought you around to work, did you have any sort of exposure? Were you in like close vicinity to any of the space apparatus and NASA facilities in Alabama or no?
No, not at all. I didn't have any real visibility in that until I went to work at Huntsville. So he just built models. He built the Saturn V model. He did Estes rockets. He did all this all the time. So he and I did a lot of that together. So that's probably the thing that stirred more than anything.
Yeah. Well, then let's set the scene for when you joined the industry. What were some of the major projects or programs going on then?
Yeah, I think when I first my summer before I graduated, there was no doubt I was going to go work for something supporting NASA. Right, I just that bit had been set in my head, and I had just an absolute blast. I figured out where my passion was, no doubt about it. But that spring or January of my last semester, we lost Challenger. The Challenger explosion occurred, and so the job boards just kind of disappeared. All the things that were most people on this podcast probably don't know what a job board is, but the universities back then, they would actually post. They
know the digital equivalent,
the digital version of that. And so they just all went away, and I got pretty fortunate in that the company that I was supporting that summer got a job to help with redesign efforts for the solid rocket motors, and basically doing the testing for it. So I was fortunate enough to get back in. I worked for them for a couple of years. We got back to flight, obviously. And then my summer work had been related to testing space shuttle main engines. And we had this thing we call technology test bed. And we weren't really testing the engine as much as we were testing new technologies. And the engine was stable, so you could use it as a platform. And we were doing I would just call some crazy things. We ran an engine off an IBM ThinkPad, just little things that we were doing. Where people out there, all these technologists had great ideas, but they had nowhere to really test them. So that's the reason they put it in place. It was separate from the flight program. And so I got fortunate enough to get hired into NASA to come help run those test programs going in. So my core, really is a test engine. That's what I love doing. I always love doing that part of it because every once in a while you're allowed to break something and like intentionally, on purpose, right? Which helps. But ultimately, what happened was I moved to Stennis Space Center, which is down in Mississippi, where I ran the full. They do all the propulsion, not all, but the majority of the propulsion testing NASA does, and big engines, little engines, future technologies, that kind of thing. I was given the opportunity to run that organization, and then once I was there for a while, we also were testing the space shuttle main engines. Our part of our job was what we call a green run or acceptance test. The engines that we had for the flights. So I got involved in the shuttle program through that, from that perspective, the actual direct program involvement. We lost Columbia.
If you don't mind me jumping in, how was the cultural shift or the lifestyle shift of moving from Bama to Mississippi?
It wasn't that different, just because the teams I was working with were it's interesting that you find wherever you move. I moved quite a few places, and you find wherever you move, you just the culture at work is very much mission focused. I mean, they are all about the mission and getting it done, and then you just find your way, right, when you move around. It's like everybody else that moves around. But the NASA part of the culture was not that different. It was just everybody, like they're just trying to get their job done, right? Every day. As long as you can lead them and help them get that done, that's part of what you want to do. But that's where down in Mississippi is where I found probably my favorite mentor was a gentleman, Roy Estes, who was the center director there. And I've never had anybody that was such a sponsor, such a teacher, and then a very just a completely unbelievably respected man. And he took me under his wing, and that's what kind of led to some of the other things I got to do at NASA. as I moved forward from there. So it was a good way to get started into the what I'll call the executive side of the house down there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that Roy asked that you had a mentor who took you under his wing early on, because that's the question I typically ask at the end of the show. But because it relates to a lot of this conversation, I'm glad that we got to it at the top. So as you mentioned, preparing for the executive portion of your career and the transition from being an engineer to an executive, of course that there are a ton of competencies and knowledge that you take with you, but what was that like? And if you can do so somewhat succinctly. I know it's hard because your leadership spans a couple of decades at the agency, but what were the key highlights, or maybe some of the lowlights rising through the ranks at NASA to eventually leading, Marshall? I know that's we're skipping around a little bit.
Yeah, that's okay. I think for me the number one leadership is all about your people. One thing that I did learn from my dad over time was, or at least give him credit for it, was you're not any better than anybody else. Everybody's just in here trying to do a job, right? And I'm always reminded of the story, whether it's mythical or real, right? Where Ken Mattingly was at the Cape and he asked the janitor, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm sending people to the moon," right? Back in the 60s. And you think about that, right? That's the workforce we have. So you got to have respect for everybody that you have. So leading people is probably the number one thing I thought about, and never thinking that I was in a different position. I was just like the rest of the team, just trying to get this job done. I just happened to be in a leadership position. So for me, and the highs of that were, return to flight after Columbia. That when I was at Stennis, and I had moved to headquarters at the time and was leading the return to flight efforts for NASA. Now, it wasn't the technical return to flight; it was more of I'll call it the political and bureaucratic side. I was in Washington, which we could talk about for hours if we wanted to, but that we won't go there. But that was a little different. But learning people, right, and learning that everybody, everything. I'm kind of a systems engineer at heart, and everywhere you go, you're just running into a new system. You just identify the elements of the system, you put them together, and you try to make them work as best you can. So the highs were, return to flight after Columbia for sure, flying out the shuttle program successfully. I was part of that as I ran the shuttle propulsion system, but also then when I moved to Marshall Space Flight Center, those big highs. The lows were we went through some back and forth programmatically on, Constellation was canceled. We reinstated, and my fingers in the reinstatement of the programs that became SLS and Artemis, the Artemis I, SLS Orion, here at Lockheed Martin. And then as you move up, right, I moved up into the role ultimately of associate administrator for the agency, which is the top civil servant, and then acting administrator for longer than I expected, about a year and a half. Your leadership style, as long as you remember it's about the people, you're going to be all right as you go up those different levels. And I have so much scar tissue around leadership. We could do a whole other podcast on leadership if you want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to take down that path too far, but there's a ton of lessons that I've got that probably not any different than anybody else, but I've got them all compiled into a nice framework. But leading people, knowing that you're going to have to deal with change, just the whole having a business acumen, a sense of, or business sense, as I call it, really important elements of leadership. But it's a grind. Yeah, it is a grind, but and it's not anything really. If you look at most engineers, right? I'm being careful here that I started engineering. Most engineers are most technically disciplined, depending on what your discipline is, right? Even your discipline, you're a communicator and trying to. You don't get trained for leadership in that process, right?
Right.
You get trained for your discipline, and so I think part of it is really OJT, on the job training for what you can do.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's fascinating because this thought, I guess, now has occurred to me twice in recent weeks, or even in recent days. But I was reading a book. I don't remember which one, but it was about some of the fits and starts in terms of returning to the moon and political programs that had some momentum and then were canceled, like Constellation and some of its predecessors, and I suppose like the importance on inside the Beltway on Capitol Hill of like building like lasting relationships and like navigating the politics of all of it. And even, now in the private sector with the whole like Twitter and SpaceX thing, people are like, oh, how complicated could it be to run Twitter if you're like landing rockets? And it actually, and a lot of times, like the complexity of humans can be more difficult than physics. But yeah, I'm sure that was there was a lot of learning on the job as associate administrator. I want to move us on to the private sector, your transition to the private sector. And when what navigating that was like, how you knew you were ready. And, now at Lockheed, like opportunities of working in the private sector in terms of operational tempo, that sort of thing, like autonomy, agency, all of that. That's a lot packed into one question. So we can take it piece by piece, the transition first.
I think the first thing I'll tell you is that what I learned, from basically 30 years at NASA is just really almost all of it's ported right over to the job here. I've got here at Lockheed Martin, I've got a very focused mission team. I mean, doesn't matter what mission we got, they stay very focused on that. So for me, that was like, I like to say it's like putting on a shoe that fits really good, right? When I came here.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the learning that I had to do for the private sector, I was very fortunate that I didn't have to learn that. In other words, my team we were already in sync. That was the way we were going to do it. And I started in strategy and business development, which was a good role for me to start when I came into the private sector, because it gave me visibility of the entire enterprise. I got to see everything we're doing. I got to talk about what's the strategies, what are the major pursuits we're going to go after, and how are we going to go do those. I did that for a couple of years, and I moved into operations, which from my test background was really comfortable for me. I mean, it was really nice to go into operations. That's where we build all the hardware. We do get everything ready for launch. The assembly test and launch operations are in there. So all this was again very comfortable. While I learned, the technical side of my job was a nice comfort zone. While I learned the financial and the business side, which is different, obviously, than government, public service position. So I had a really nice kind of transition, the way that Lockheed Martin helped me, frankly, transition into spots. And then a year ago, I was selected to be the executive vice president here for space. And so again, just living from a perspective is all about our people, right? And a few other things that I had to learn. The transition was actually not as hard as I thought it would be. And I would just say that for me, it was very important for me to find a very like-minded organization to the way I think. Lockheed Martin has 3 tenets that they follow. Basically, do what's right, perform with excellence, and respect others. Right? That's pretty simple, right? But it really fit my thinking, and the team when I got here demonstrated that. I saw that every day. So it's been a pretty easy transition from that perspective. Financials, okay, I've had to learn a lot there. It's a little different, I always laughed that my board of directors was Congress and the White House, and so now I've moved into more of a different board, or what I would call a normal board, publicly traded company.
Well, that's another instance, I suppose, of OTJ, right?
Yeah,
OTJ.
On job training.
Okay. I was counting the instead of the training, but I think the training is probably more important in that acronym. So I definitely can see how there were a lot of similarities. And I actually want to talk a little bit more about like the operations and enterprise of Lockheed Martin Space, or LM Space, as I'm probably going to start referring to it more. But I have buried the lead quite a bit here, but I would love to talk a bit about Artemis I and what that represents to you as a leader, and as having flown like very, very important hardware on that mission. So and I guess just what these weeks since the mission, successfully, since we saw it successfully completed, what it's been like.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I can't. It's the only word I keep coming up with is vehicle performed extremely well. The teams were, any of the issues we dealt with were really the teams. As one of my colleagues said, we're just learning how to fly in space, right? And so it was fun to see the teams work through, daily interaction with the spacecraft and what we were doing. And Orion just, oh my goodness, we couldn't, we got a lot of little things we'll be dealing with for the next flight, but it's just flawless. And I got to tell you, the sigh of relief when I saw the three good shoots, right?
Yeah.
From that camera was like, oh, whew, all right, we're home. We made it home. And I think that's the thing that is really in the human spaceflight world, right, that we're dealing with here. It's great to see a launch, right? I'm an old rocket guy. I told you that from Marshall. I was part of establishing the Space Launch System when I was there as the center director. So, yeah, I was on that end of the business. But I got to tell you, the whole goal is to bring people home, right? When you're talking about space, got to get them home. It doesn't matter how far out we go. If we don't get them home, we fail, right? And so for those of us on the 25-day mission that we dealt with after launch, every day was kind of like you're waiting for your morning report from the mission control and how are we doing, any systems we need to get some people involved in. And again, we just, you would, if you, for those of us in this business, if you'd been there, you'd thought we'd been doing this for years. It was that felt that natural, but still, all the good things that we did, when you saw the three shoots, it was,
I can imagine.
And then
I can imagine.
Some of the things we did on the mission, though, Ryan, that were so cool. While we're doing all the regular stuff, we had a partnership. Part of one of the strategies we've got is around here is how do we do these partnerships with folks that are probably non-traditional in our world. So we got Amazon with Alexa and Cisco WebEx, and we had this iPad kind of type arrangement on Orion, and you could interface with it. You could talk to it, and you could do things on the mission. And it ended up being a phenomenal tool to engage some kids. We had a lot of STEM engagement throughout the country. We engaged the White House. Even my senior team got to talk to Orion as it was traveling back, and it was cool because the Earth was up in the corner. You could it was amazing that those things worked, and those are the kind of things you want to do on a test flight.
Yeah. Well, what was the average? How many hours of sleep were you averaging during those 25 days, and how did that deviate at all from your normal average?
Didn't deviate at all.
There you go. Yeah, I know it's
the way I used to tell people is if I'm losing sleep, then I probably shouldn't have launched in the first place, right? Because
there you go.
And our team was
there. You go.
That was, I used to say that in the shuttle days. If I'm losing sleep, then something's gnawing at me. We need to think about it. But here, this team was ready and they showed it. I was pretty proud of them. Really proud of them.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad to hear that you were able to savor some of the small moments. I was just thinking during those 25 days, the amount of the spectacular imagery that we saw from the spacecraft, like we were just oohing and awing at all of that. But for you, you had a mission to finish. It wasn't just like send it on autopilot and call it a day, of course.
Yeah, I still enjoyed those images though.
Good.
I don't mind telling you, I'll send a few to corporate headquarters going, look at this. It's pretty impressive, right? Just to make sure they knew what we were doing out here.
Yeah. No, those images were spectacular. And the technology too. I recall seeing a few stories and seeing some of the trials of the kind of in cockpit technology, and y'all had some nice lights. Callisto, right? Yeah. The lights were cool too. I did notice that I think Lauren from Bloomberg, she tried it and she mentioned that she tried to play Highway to Hell and it wasn't supported. So I want to get you on the record here for the next mission. Will you have AC/DC supported for the astronauts who want to listen to it?
We'll work that and see. I remember when I was on the shuttle program, there was always a morning wake up song that was played. for the crew. So,
That's great.
since
It
we
might
have
it might actually be better to have flight control or to have someone on
it's
the
not
ground pick
real
it and for it to
breaks
be
the music, get to pick the music. So I'm not
okay.
sure.
There you go. Yeah. So what have you learned after retrieving the spacecraft? You know, as you mentioned the chutes, like there were all the images of it being pulled up with the chutes kind of, I don't know what the correct term is, pulled up, but and now I'm assuming it's on land. Is what's the sort of the post mission operations and just
A lot
expecting
of that,
everything?
yeah, a lot of it is data review, right? We got a ton of data to go through. Then there's the review of the hardware. We'll do that in conjunction with NASA, right? The NASA team as well. The hardware is on a truck headed back to Kennedy as we speak. So we had a set of inspections we could do in San Diego in port. So we did those. That data is being analyzed. Put it on the truck, and when it gets to the Cape, they'll do a more in depth review and of the actual hardware. Plus, we're going to take some of the hardware off and use it for the next mission. So it again early in the stage of all that, but so far we're in pretty good shape.
Great. We're actually like I said, we have to talk a little bit about the business and the finances and everything. But you mentioned the next mission. I think this is a good opportunity to ask. And going back to your point about people, what do you think the impact of this mission, and especially the next mission, the crewed mission, and then of course Artemis III will be on? And I guess I need to be a little bit precise here with how I focus the scope of this question. I think you talked about obviously the effects on morale of the workforce and everything with this the space shuttle disasters, but of course going back to the 60s, the Apollo program inspired, I don't even know how many people to go into space, to go into STEM. It had all of these positive externalities. What do you think the effects of of the Artemis era will be on that? And I suppose I would like to hear just for, us as a nation, but then also what the view is from Lockheed Martin and from your ability to recruit and compete with, any other company for like talented young engineers, technical talent in the job market. So first like big picture for the country.
I think for the big picture, the goal here is always all the missions we do, not just Artemis. A lot of the goal is to inspire that next generation. Right? You look at the picture behind me of Hubble. You look at some of the James Webb images coming from the NIRCam instrument that Lockheed built its own James Webb. I mean, Artemis I, the photographs. It's somehow you got to get to that innate. I think innate in human beings, the innate desire to explore, right? And so, how do I get that next generation engaged so that they want to be part of it? And if you'd been at our event, and I'll just use our event because it's the one I was attending, right? The amount of children, right, that were at this event, young kids, children, and they were cheering and they were excited, and I thought to myself, think about the folks that said I was inspired by Neil Armstrong's first steps on, right? Did we just inspire one? That to me is kind of a intangible about what we're trying to do here. Yes, we're trying to take humans back to the moon, but the whole thing is we need a generation behind us, and that's what I love about the Artemis generation. We talk about that, and let me give you a real personal example, Ryan. For me, I was a little kid when the Apollo missions flew, and I remember them, but I don't remember them probably as well as I did years ago, and I think about this the generation of kids coming through now, what we're calling the Artemis generation. What's their example? What's their existence proof? And so the other night I was in an event celebrating Apollo 17, and they had the footage from the liftoff, right, of the Apollo mission. They had them on the moon. They had them coming back, and it ended with the shoots, right? And when I had to make remarks that night, and I stood up at the podium and I started my remarks with, "Wow, that felt a lot more real than it's ever felt before," because of the last 2 months. I said I'd always seen this video of the Saturn V launching and the capsule coming home. And yet we just experienced that. My generation, the new next just got to experience that. And I was thinking, how awesome is that we probably have just pulled a whole nother generation. Right. And again, so I think the challenge for workforce is, back to your original question, we all have that, industry wide, right? The goal of getting folks into STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math kind of roles. That's a goal for all of us. And we need that workforce. It's not that I need it more than anybody else. We all need it.
Yeah.
So
it's not zero sum.
Yeah.
It's not zero
for
sum.
us at
Right.
Lockheed, it's Lockheed Martin. We're trying, everything we can to do it. And having missions like this is what attracts some of that talent, right? It allows us to, I want to be part of that, because and what I like to tell folks is that you come to Lockheed Martin, and we're not the only ones, but you come to Lockheed Martin and you're going to get to do something you could never do by yourself. You would get part of something that you could never do on your own. And my whole experience, my whole career, whether it's testing, whether it's flying space shuttles, whether it's flying other rockets, building a space station, all these things that I was involved in, and now seeing this Artemis mission, I just go, so much about the team. And it gets all the way back to my basic principle of it's all about the people, right? So I got to get that next generation of folks coming to join us.
That's great. I'll have to after we stop recording, round up some of these principles for the episode description, because you've shared a lot of very, very valuable ones. I think that folks, our listeners, would appreciate. I'm glad you touched on the breadth of what Lockheed has. It's what your team with the space division has its hands on, because it's of course more than just Orion and human rated spacecraft. So do you want to take a crack at just surveying the broad portfolio of space capabilities that you've developed or that you are developing that are unclassified? I don't want to get you in any trouble here.
we do have, I think Ryan, we kind of summarize it in 3 words that we use. I use these all the time, and I think it's important for if we can get you out here to visit, you'll see those 3 words on the walls in a couple of places. We use the 3 words: protect, connect, and explore. That's kind of our
fantastic
our mantra. And so when you think about what we do as Lockheed Martin Space, when I think about protect, it's the systems that we build to protect the warfighter. Right? We build a lot of systems in space we do overhead persistent infrared systems. These are missile warning systems that let people know, hey, a missile's been launched. They cover those kind of things. Right? That's one area we do under the protect. But we also build weather satellites for NOAA, right? And those satellites are helping people when hurricanes are coming, helping when severe weather's creeping across the states, or even some of these winter storms that we're seeing. And as the weather events seem to be more dramatic, it's helping, with those kind of activities. So in the protect category, that's kind of a summary of what we do in protect. Under connect, we have several things we do. We have communication satellites that we fly that connect the military from an overall perspective of, so they've got the right communications that they need. But we also build GPS satellites. So your GPS satellites are built right here. And so I build weather satellites, GPS satellites. I mean, this is connecting and protecting, like you wouldn't believe. And then
there's one GPS satellite that was just recently in transit, right? I think one of the 3rd generation ones. I think I recall seeing that Air Force shared a photo of it.
Yeah, vehicle number 6. And I think it's scheduled to launch in first quarter, January, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
So that's the next one. I will, if you don't mind, I'll tell you a little anecdote.
Absolutely. By all means.
I was speaking at an event, and I made a comment about us shipping. That happened to be Vehicle 5, and I say we just shipped Vehicle 5 to the Cape. This was months ago. I said we just shipped Vehicle 5 to the Cape the night before. So I thought that'd be nice to say. And then, as a joke, I said, I told some people that, and somebody goes, why do I need satellites anymore? I've got GPS on my phone.
Oh, man.
And so now, but it was a joke, right? But only half the room laughed, right? And I said, for those who didn't laugh, you'll need to come see me after my talk, because You think your GPS on your phone is not driven by satellite. It's crazy. Anyway, so that's the connect part.
That's a constant uphill battle for all of us, right?
Right.
Everyone in the space industry.
It's like weather, right? Our dependency on space is a lot more than I think we realize. Financial institutions, all the different things that are going on. Anyway, but get back to the last one. The last piece of our goal in this protect, connect, and explore is actually explore. And you see Artemis, right? That fits the Artemis generation, but it also fits some of the other scientific missions we're doing. We've got OSIRIS-REx, which is bringing back the sample from the asteroid Bennu, which is supposed to come back in the fall of this year. That'll be a big deal. Having taken a sample of something, that many miles away, and doing it precisely the way we did it. I mean, it's just crazy. The things we're doing on Mars, Mars sample return. We're part of the Mars sample return mission. Of course, we've been part of all the rovers that are on Mars today. So it's just there's so much around what we're doing. We've been involved, I think, with every mission, or we've been involved with the missions that have gone to every planet in the solar system. And then you go further out, and you can talk about NIRCam that's on James Webb Space Telescope, which is going to we're already bringing back amazing imagery. So that's kind of how we bucket our roles here in space: protect, connect, and explore. I mean, I can get into more details around each one of them, but that's really the summary of what we do. It's about $12 billion a year from an overall financial perspective. But the main thing is the missions that we get to do, and we're just really fortunate that the government actually helps. We do most of those for the U.S. government. Going forward. So.
That's well. See, it's. I'm glad that that I allotted some airtime to just listing out some of those out and bracketing them out, because just the some of the examples that you gave on the explore bucket, asteroid sample return, which I believe only 2 nations have done. Mars rovers, like casually, just all of these probes and machines and spacecraft that are quite literally like pushing the boundary, like very literally in a literal sense, in a cosmic sense, even. I am curious to dive a little deeper on those, and maybe on the 3, from the perspective of kind of budget, financial operations, that sort of thing. Because as you point out, it's a $12 billion business, and you oversee, or at last count on your bio, 22,000 people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is like, if this was its own, and hypothetically, like if Dish Space was spun out, this is a massive business. So you're curious just what the day to day of managing all of that and keeping everything on track and overseeing all of these operations, because it's a lot.
Yeah, I honestly, Ryan, good people, right? That support me. I mean, I've got a great team around me, and let me give you a quick comparison again, back to the discussion around NASA. When I was at NASA, we had 21,000 people, and we had about a $19 billion budget. So you can see that shoe that fits about right for me from a leadership perspective. And I think what I learned, in my early career and at NASA was put good people around you, and it'll be okay, right? And I think that's what we see here. I've got a fantastic team that exercises the missions. The hardest part for me, honestly, is I'm pretty much a space geek like the rest of the folks, and I have to let them do their job sometimes, right? I always want to get in more than I probably need to at my level, but it's almost, as I tell people, in my position is now not having the answers, but it's asking the right questions, right? And sometimes I have to make sure I'm not asking too many questions and making them do things that aren't necessary. But I have a phenomenal team here. Some of the best, some of the smartest people in the world. I've had a couple of people join our team recently, and the comment that both of them made to me, and when I did a check-in, how you doing? Is the transition going okay? Because they were new into Lockheed Martin, and they said, "Wow, we got smart people here. We got really smart people." And it didn't matter, by the way, it's all the disciplines. It's not just the technical, engineering type disciplines. It's my comms team. It's my legal team. It's the financial team. I mean, they are just, that whole group is amazing here. And they're all just foresight focused on getting these missions done. So yeah, I think that's the key when you're in one of these positions is you just got to let your team do their job, right? And not micromanage from that perspective, but also, there's some accountability you have to pay attention to. I mean, but it's no different again than when I was asked.
Certainly. I think I hear that a lot from engineers in this world in space. That engineers turn managers. That there's always the temptation to want to to get into the nuts and bolts, but a lot of times that's just not what the job dictates. But I feel like you are not alone in that regard.
It is very hard, Ryan. I will just tell you, especially with you've been somebody, as I like to say, when you've been somebody that's been part of having the answers, right? It is so hard not to. You hold yourself back sometimes and just let the team do what they do best.
Yeah. So set aside the challenges and opportunities, I would say, of communicating with the public about space and the value of space and why we go to space, which of course you have many decades of experience doing. I want to ask about what that's like with the public markets, because there are, of course, companies such as yourselves that have been public for a long time, and so investors and Wall Street analysts and institutions and everything may be a little bit more familiar. But I think with a lot of the newer space companies that have gone public, there's been a lot of turbulence for a lot of reasons. But I'm curious what it's like, communicating to shareholders on a quarterly basis, or even depending on how you slice it, on a daily basis, the nuances of kind of the long cycles of government contracts and just the complexity of these programs, and even just your organization, as we've already covered. It is quite a large organization with hands on so many different elements of space exploration, communication, and protection. I think what's the last one?
Yeah, protect, connect, and explore. I'll hit it again.
Protect, connect, explore. There you go. Yeah, I'm not going to forget it after that.
Yeah. So I think that it's interesting, Ryan, because I think the part of the business side of this, right, is that when you look at our some of the things we're dealing with in space, you have a change in the threat dynamic. When you think about from a defense side of the house, right, we now have a Space Force. We're worried about protecting assets in space, all the different things that we deal with there. The threat has changed, and I think the threat has changed in a way where we have to be faster. And so you've got a lot of new entities that have come in. And while I can do all that, I mean, I've got the capability here to do it. I told you we got some of the smartest people in the world here. Sometimes I don't have the time, right? And so what I'm trying to do is as these new folks come into this space, no pun intended, as they come into this space, how do I leverage their capability? How do I partner with them, right? In a way that they can help me bring mission value to the nation, right? That's what we're trying to do. So I think there's when I look at all of them, we, as I like to say, we were new space once too, right? We were a new entrant decades ago. But we're going to be here, and we have to continually. Part of my goal is we have to continually innovate, and we're innovating all the time. And I have pockets of mine that are pockets of my groups that are as they're as engaged in innovation as anybody else in this country, right? Probably in the world. And they're building that next thing. So I have to reinvent myself. I have to reinvent the capabilities I can bring to bear. But I also want to be able to partner with folks. You can look at we're working with NVIDIA, we're working with Microsoft, we're working with Amazon, we're working with all these other companies, ABL, a launch system, a brand new launch system. These are things I don't have to do myself, right? I shouldn't have to do them myself. I can leverage that and in some ways help build the industrial base up for this country. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it from a business perspective. And that's kind of that helps us to get to the answers faster. My customers today are telling me speed is the number one thing, right?
Yeah.
So
like
got to do it.
A good example of that, I think, would be we just wrote a longer explainer on it, but the NDSA, I'll put it in the show links, but the NDSA, right?
The NDSA.
the National Defense Space Architecture.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't know how often people use the abbreviation, but the SDA is new, like constellations.
I think there's exactly, and they're coming in with a different posture. They're even thinking, they've even procured it differently. How you acquire these services is even changing. In terms of what used to be bespoke is now common. So where do you put your capabilities, and how do you deal with that? That's stuff we talk about all the time, right? Is where can we partner and where can we do this? So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of the way we're looking at this. And it is, hey, I think it's fantastic that all these folks are coming into this industry and into this. We need that, right? We need in some cases, we need their technology and we need their agility, right? Often what we bring to the table is we bring that intersection where we have that same kind of technology, but we bring scale. We're large enough that we can actually do these things at scale. And that is a really nice sweet spot for us when we can partner with somebody that's new in this world, but also bring the scale that allows them to become part of the industrial base for this country.
Yeah, and scale and a track record of execution. I would add. The last question on like the end kind of customer side, of course, is and that is like from the perspective of the U.S. government, what thoughts you have, if any, on like the changing nature of contracts in a lot of areas from cost plus to fixed.
Yeah, I think we participate in basically all those kind of acquisitions. Yeah, and I think that for us, it really becomes the government's. How does the government want to buy that service? Do they want to, how are they going to? How precise are they going to be with their requirements? Is it going to be a service? You can look at all the different things they're doing. We have examples that we do. We do fixed price. We do cost plus. We do services, right? And so I think now we've had to adjust. I told you we're constantly adjusting. We clearly have had to adjust to be part of that. But I think it's really kind of up to the customer, the government mostly, and even some of our commercial customers. It's kind of up to them to kind of set how do they want to do it. Are they buying a lock and key, right? Are they just buying this and we're done with it, or are they going to be along the ride with us, right? Because sometimes I think what when I was a customer, when I was on the other side, a lot of times we would need to get folks on board to help us even know what we wanted. We had a concept of where we wanted to go, so you'd bring industry on pretty early, and that would usually be a cost plus type of thing because we didn't have the requirements nailed down. I didn't need this color, this size, but something I couldn't really be very specific. But when you can be specific and it's kind of a common something that we all kind of know how much it costs, and fixed price is the way to go. So it's a good approach for both sides, for the companies and for the government. But it really becomes this discussion of how much oversight, how much insight do you want as a customer, and then what are you going to pay for that perspective? So I think we all have to just adapt to the different ways that they're buying the things they're buying, and we, like I said, we do them all, and we've shown performance on all of them. So I'm comfortable we can handle that arena. But that's also, by the way, just so you know, Ryan, that's one of the areas where we bring, talk about what do we bring to some of these partnerships. Just knowing how to navigate the federal acquisitions regulations and all the different things that we have to navigate for all our different customers. A lot of the new entrants are like, why don't y'all do that for us and we'll bring you the technology.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
We don't want to learn. We don't want to learn all that. We don't want to be involved in that. But they have something, technology that can really enable these missions. And I think that's that power of partnership that we're working with, strategic partnership.
Yeah. No, I think that insight and that perspective is valuable to hear, and I think it will be for our audience as well. I want to be mindful too of the stopwatch, proverbial stopwatch here, because I love the word skunkworks. I love just the concept in government and in these companies of like the advanced kind of development groups and everything. So I want to give a nod to that and hear what it means, being the company that a while back kind of was Skunkworks and still has Skunkworks, and just hear a bit about what, some of the big developments or programs that you're that are on the horizon that you're most excited about.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Skunkworks is obviously an important phrase in terms of Lockheed Martin and an important organization. The way I say it, the way I've said it several times for my space team is, Skunkworks is as much a mentality as it is an organization, right? And so we've recently formed an organization here that's our innovation center. That's, if you can, it's our version of Skunkworks, right? We'll never get to that trademark and that brand value, at least not anytime soon. However, we're starting to. We've had those pockets of innovation that we do. That's really what Skunkworks means to me, is where you being innovative, right? Where you bringing to bear kind of the new things that you can bring forward to the customer. Maybe the customer hasn't decided to buy that, but you got to go do that. And how are you being innovative? So there, what we're doing, Ryan, honestly, is we're embracing a whole lot of new digital tools that are allowing us to get our work done faster, and frankly cheaper, less expensive. And what tools can we bring in? And when you've got decades old systems, how do you, which in platforms that are already on orbit, they're up there, they're flying around. How do you do you spend time backing those into a digital environment, or you just go forward? So, an example: every program we have here at Lockheed, I dictated this about a year ago, that every program is going to be born digital. That's our phrase we use, right? So you think about, it's got to be digital from day one in terms of the platform, and I think that's an example. While that doesn't sound, quote, innovative, right? Maybe when you think about it, because most people are used to the digital platform, but that's how I attract the talent. Because most of my talent that's coming in was born digital, right?
Yep, totally.
So I got to have systems here that allow them to do that work, and we're bringing those into play for sure. And then there's programs that we're working on. I mean, I use the example of a ton of things we're trying to do in deep space associated with things that we're working on around nuclear thermal propulsion and projects that we can do that nobody's really bought yet. They've bought the pieces, or they've talked about acquiring the pieces or developing the pieces, but we're trying to put them together as systems going forward. That's an example. Next generation infrared system, right? That you mentioned, the SDA transport layer and tracking layer activities that we're involved in. So there's a lot, and each one of those, by the way, requires a new innovation. Can't bring the old stuff here forward. So how do I get computing on the edge? How do I have, we today we go satellite to ground, back to satellite. How do I do all that on the satellite? Right? How do I do that kind of thing? Where do I bring the artificial intelligence and the machine learning in to these spacecraft so that they're able to make some of those decisions on it? Now, this is going to be a process, right? Because today a human's in the loop in a control room, to help make some decisions. How do we build that trust in those kind of systems so that the humans can actually say, yeah, I kind of trust the satellite to make its own decision before it goes forward? And those are some of the areas that we're really working on, trying to bring that innovative mentality that a Skunkworks philosophy plays.
Yeah, that's great. And we covered when you made the announcement with the video about digital twins. I'll put that in the show notes. But in the interest of time here, we're gonna move to the lightning round section, and we talked about your role model, which was great. This is a first for me, because I actually have another recording with Jim Bridenstine in a few hours, and so I want to outsource my job to you, actually, and say, if you wanted to ask him one question on a podcast today, what would you ask him?
For Jim Bridenstine, you said, right?
Yeah.
Difference between being in Congress and authorizing or approving NASA versus running NASA.
Awesome. That's great.
Jim,
see, that's like
Jim
that,
very well. Please tell Jim I said hello, by the way.
I will.
I was acting administrator waiting for him to get confirmed, right? So that was
yeah.
He was on the job for a while. He got held up for a while.
Right. No, that's fantastic, and I'll tell him to say hi, and I'll ask as well. Second quick lightning round question. I think I'm interested to hear your hottest take or most sort of contrarian view on the future of space, and it could be any. I'm using space pretty broadly here, so it could be any part of the space sort of economy or space flight, human space flight exploration, that sort of thing.
I think for me, the most interesting perspective is I think there's still going to be a lot of new players in space. I think space is the next economy that a lot of people are interested in. I just don't know how many are going to survive. I mean, I think it's a very tough economy as well. And a lot of people, what I'll tell you is a lot of folks are ahead of their time. If they came in 5 years later, it might be the perfect time. And I think, and who hangs on during that time is going to be the ones that actually survive this next kind of fourth industrial revolution that I think is space based.
Right. Well, definitely does seem like there's a decent amount of consolidation ahead, and not the least of which, like the last two announcements we've seen over the last 72 hours. But that is a topic for another day. Robert, thank you so much for joining us. This has been awesome.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Okay, folks, that will do it for Pathfinder 0028, powered by Payload and brought to you by Altec. The clock is quickly running out for 2022, but we've got a great year in review for everything that happened this year in space planned for later this week. So look for that in the Payload newsletter and sign up if you aren't already subscribed. As for Pathfinder, we're going to take this rocket ship through a strong finish for 2022 and to new heights in 2023. That cliche or metaphor is awful. I'm sorry for using it, and I will be retiring it right away. Anyways, if you like what you heard, leave us a rating and review wherever you're listening to this. And if you're looking for a last-minute Christmas gift for space-inclined family members or coworkers, you can send them Pathfinder. It's free and it comes with same-day shipping. That will do it for today's episode, though. I'm your host, Ryan Duffy, signing off, and I'll see you back here very soon for a special surprise episode.